the illegitimate son, clashed with the heir to protect his wronged black mother. The mansion woke before the sun ever did, but she woke earlier still. Every morning. Her footsteps were the first sound the great house heard. Soft, measured, familiar. She carried the weight of the estate on her shoulders long before the nobles stirred from their feathered beds. Her hands were cracked from scrubbing stone floors and carrying boiling pots, but she moved with a grace that contrasted painfully with the life she'd been forced into. She was the servant no one thanked, the woman the kingdom refused to see, the black mother whose presence made certain nobles wrinkle their noses as if dignity could be stained by skin. But to her son, she was the strongest person alive. He watched her from the corner of the servants' corridor that morning, small and quiet, his knees pressed to his chest as she prepared the hall for the Lord and his heir. He was only a boy, but he had already learned how to disappear. In this house, shadows were safer than attention. His mother noticed him anyway. She always did. She walked toward him slowly, wiping her hands on her apron. "You're awake early." He shrugged, but he wouldn't meet her gaze. She crouched beside him, tucking a curl behind his ear. "You should still be sleeping," she whispered. "I heard voices," he said. "The heir is already angry today." That didn't surprise her. The heir seemed born angry, always searching for someone beneath him to step on. He hated mistakes, he hated servants, but above all, he hated the two people in the estate he believed didn't belong, her, and the child she had brought into the world. She exhaled slowly. "Stay away from him." "I do," he said, "but he finds me anyway." Her jaw tightened in a way only he ever saw, a flash of protective fire she never showed in front of nobles. She lifted his chin gently. "You're not what he says you are," she murmured. "Do you hear me?" He nodded, though he didn't fully believe it. "You're my son. That alone gives you worth no one can take." Before he could answer, voices boomed from the main hall. "Where is she? Fetch the woman. Tell her to move faster." The boy stiffened. His mother stood slowly, squared her shoulders, and forced her breath to steady. "I have to go." He grabbed her hand. "Don't." She paused. The fear in his small fingers pierced through her like a blade. She knelt again, lowering her forehead to his. "I'll be fine," she whispered. "I always am." But he knew she wasn't. Not really. Not when nobles looked at her with disgust. Not when the heir spoke to her with venom. Not when the Lord, his father, pretended she was invisible. Still, she rose with dignity and walked toward the hall. The boy followed at a distance, silent, careful, keeping to the shadows the way she had taught him. Through the cracked door, he saw his mother bowing before the heir as he lounged with lazy arrogance at the massive dining table. The heir saw her the way others saw dust, a nuisance best swept aside. "You're late," the heir said, though she wasn't. His voice oozed entitlement, each syllable dripping superiority. "Father is displeased." "I apologize," she murmured. "Do it properly," he snapped. "On your knees." The boy's breath caught in his throat. She didn't deserve this. Not for being black, not for being poor, not for being the only one who kept this house running. But still, in front of nobles and servants and guards, she knelt. The shame didn't belong to her, but she carried it anyway. The heir smirked, leaning back in his chair as though punishing her were a morning sport. "Perhaps if you weren't so slow, you wouldn't cause disappointment." She didn't respond. She never did. Silence was her armor, but silence was killing her. The boy felt something harden inside him for the first time. His hands clenched, his teeth locked together, his vision blurred with a new kind of fire, one that didn't belong in a child's heart. He wanted to rush in, he wanted to scream, he wanted to pull her up and stand between her and every cruel gaze in that hall. But if he did, they would hurt her more. So he stayed hidden, trembling with helpless fury, watching the scene carve itself into his soul. And as his mother finally rose, bowing once more before stepping back to her duties, She lifted her gaze for a single heartbeat. Her eyes found her son's silhouette in the corridor. She gave him the smallest, saddest smile, the kind only a mother can give when she wants to hide her pain for her child's sake. And in that moment, the boy made a promise, a seed of an oath, silent, burning, fierce. One day, he would no longer be powerless. One day, someone would kneel before her. And one day, the heir would learn what happens when a son rises to protect the mother the kingdom tried so hard to break. He learned very young that the world decided who he was long before he had a chance to speak for himself. It was in the way servants whispered when he passed, their voices barely above breath but sharp enough to cut. It was in the looks the guards gave him, that mix of annoyance and suspicion usually reserved for stray dogs. It was in the noble's laughter, not the joyful kind, but the kind that dripped down like poison, meant to remind him of his place. He was the wrong child, born from the wrong woman, carrying the wrong blood. A walking reminder of a secret the lord of the estate wished had never happened. He began to understand this at an age when other children still chased butterflies and believed the world was gentle. He could never afford such illusions. He saw too much. He listened too well. And he learned early that his mere existence angered people who had never spoken to him. He remembered the first time a noble sneered the word bastard at him. He didn't understand the word then, but he understood the tone, the disgust, the superiority, the coldness that lingered like smoke. He had asked his mother later what the word meant, and she had hesitated so long he regretted asking. When she finally answered, her voice trembled with a kind of sadness that made him wish he could erase the word from the world entirely. "It means people are cruel," she had whispered. "But it does not mean you are less." He wanted to believe her. He tried. But the world was loud, and kindness was quiet. He saw how they treated her, the whispers that weren't whispers, the looks that weren't subtle, the way her skin made people speak slower, sharper, crueler. She was the first to rise, the last to sleep, the one who cleaned the messes nobles made and received none of the praise they gave each other. He saw how the heir looked at her with an arrogance sharper than any blade, the heir whose chin always lifted as if the world belonged to him, the heir who watched the boy with eyes filled with disdain long before either of them understood why. The heir who understood before the boy did that they shared something forbidden, the same father. But unlike the boy, the heir had been born with the world's approval. He didn't need to earn anything. Everything was handed to him. Power, respect, admiration. Even cruelty came to him easily. And the boy learned painfully that the heir's hatred ran deeper than mere hierarchy. It was personal, ugly, ancient. He saw it in small moments, the ones most adults overlooked. When his mother passed carrying laundry, the heir would move his cloak aside as if her shadow might stain it. When the boy delivered letters to the study, the heir would watch him like someone observing a bug climbing up the wall, curious, irritated, ready to crush it. When the mother walked by the hall with her eyes lowered, the heir smirked in ways that made the boy's stomach twist. These were the tiny wounds that built a lifetime of pain. The quiet cutting, the slow breaking. One morning, when the boy was around 10, he overheard two servants whispering near the well. "It's a shame," one said. "If only she weren't, you know." The other scoffed. "Her skin's the first thing nobles see. They don't look past it. They don't want to." And the boy? Marked before he even breathed. Born wrong. The boy froze. Their voices sank into him like stones tied to his ankles, dragging him deeper into waters he didn't know how to escape. He walked away from the well with fire in his throat and a weight in his chest. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat by the window of the servants' quarters, knees tucked against his chest, staring at the moon while his mother slept across the room after a day too long and too cruel. He whispered to the night, to himself, to the universe that had already decided so much for him. "I don't want to be wrong." The moon didn't answer, but his heart did. He looked at his mother's tired face, at the way she curled her hands even in sleep, hands that carried too much pain, too much work, too much history. He saw how the world ignored her strength, how it tried to grind her down until she bowed not out of humility, but out of exhaustion. And something inside him shifted. A small, fragile spark, a seed of defiance, a whisper of a promise. "If the world won't see her worth," he murmured, "then I will. And one day, they will too." The thought terrified him, and yet it steadied him. He didn't know how. He didn't know when. He didn't know what force he could ever possess to fight an heir, a noble house, a kingdom. But he knew this. He may have been born into the world wrong, but he would not live that way. He would carve a space for himself. He would carve justice for her. He would carve truth into a lineage built on lies. Because no matter who tried to break his mother, no matter who stepped on her humanity, no matter how loudly the world shouted his worthlessness, he would rise for her. Cruelty doesn't appear suddenly. It grows, it festers, it sharpens itself quietly in the corners of privilege until one day it becomes bold enough to show its teeth. The heir's cruelty began like that, small, almost invisible. But the boy noticed every moment, because every moment cut his mother first. The heir had been raised to believe the world revolved around him. Servants bowed deeper when he passed. Nobles praised him for virtues he didn't possess. Even the Lord, his father, watched him with a mixture of pride and fear, as if he saw too much of himself in the son who would one day replace him. And the heir absorbed all this attention like a throne built under his feet long before he had learned to walk. But when the boy's mother entered a room, everything shifted. The heir's jaw hardened, his gaze sharpened, his posture straightened, as if preparing for a challenge only he could see. He despised her, not because she had wronged him, but because she existed in a world where he believed she never should have. He didn't understand, not at first, why his father's eyes followed her when she passed, why the Lord's voice softened the rare moments he spoke to her, why there was something unspoken, something forbidden, lingering like smoke each time the mother and Lord shared a room. But children sense truths long before they're told. And the heir sensed the one thing he could not accept. His father had loved her. Not the queen, not the noble women fit for court, but the black servant who lived in the shadows. The boy didn't know this yet, but the heir did. And it poisoned him. It grew with him, year by year, twisting his entitlement into something darker. When the boy was 8, the heir began ordering him around, not with words, but with gestures, treating him like a stray creature he could command with a flick of his hand. When he was 9, the heir kicked over a bucket his mother carried, splashing scalding water across the floor. She knelt instantly to clean it, despite the pain in her reddened palms. The heir smirked, walking away without a second glance. When the boy was 10, the heir accidentally brushed past his mother in the corridor, sending her sprawling to the floor. The guards didn't move, the servants didn't speak, and the heir settled his cloak over his shoulder like nothing worth noticing had happened. The boy rushed to help her, his small hands trembling. Her eyes were dry, but only because she had learned long ago that tears fed cruelty rather than stopping it. "It's all right," she whispered. But he saw her wince when she stood, and something inside him cracked. When the boy was 11, the heir cornered him behind the stables, blocking his escape with a polished boot. "Why are you here?" the heir sneered. "Why does she keep you here? Does she think this is where you belong?" The boy didn't answer, not because he didn't want to, but because he had no words that would matter. The heir leaned closer. "People like you don't belong in this house. People like your mother don't belong anywhere near my family." The boy felt heat rise in his cheeks, shame, anger, confusion. He didn't know which one to listen to. "It's not your house," he said quietly. The heir's eyes widened, not from fear, but from disbelief that someone he considered beneath him had dared push back. He shoved the boy against the stable wall. "Everything here belongs to me, and one day, so will the power to decide who stays and who goes." He walked away without looking back. The boy didn't cry, but something in him changed that day. He learned fear, not the kind that makes you run, but the kind that makes you watch. the kind that makes you anticipate every footstep in the hall, every shift in the air's expression, every sudden quiet that meant danger was close. And his mother? Her scars were invisible to most, but not to him. He saw how she flinched when she heard the heir's footsteps behind her, how she avoided crossing rooms he occupied, how she worked twice as hard when he watched, as if trying to shrink herself into something less threatening to him. But the heir's cruelty didn't stop with small humiliations. As he grew older, tall, handsome, praised by tutors and nobles alike, his cruelty matured with him. It became calculated, deliberate, sharpened by the resentment he clutched like a weapon. One evening, when the boy was 12, he overheard the heir shouting inside the Lord's study, "You promised me she would be gone." A long silence followed. The Lord's voice came next, softer, burdened. "She has served this house faithfully." "She's a servant," the heir spat. "She's nothing." The boy pressed himself against the wall, heart pounding. "And him," the heir continued, voice thick with disgust. "Why is he still here? Why do you let him walk these halls? Why do you let them breathe the same air as us?" The boy felt his stomach twist. Then the heir said the words that would haunt him for years. "Do you love them more than you love us?" Silence. A terrible silence. The heir stormed out, slamming the door. The boy saw his father's shadow through the crack, head in hands, shoulders heavy with guilt and choices he never had the courage to face. From that night on, the heir's cruelty grew teeth. He stopped hiding his hatred, stopped masking his disdain, stopped waiting for excuses to hurt the boy's mother. And the boy learned what it meant to be the target of a noble's rage. The heir treated him as a stain he needed to erase. But the boy, though small and powerless, watched everything, remembered everything. Because one day, he would stand between the heir and the only person he loved more than his own life. One day, the heir would regret underestimating the child born wrong. The day it happened did not begin like a tragedy. It began like any other morning in the estate, with her rising before the stars had fully faded, lighting the kitchen hearth, whispering small prayers under her breath so softly that only she and whatever God still listened could hear them. The boy followed her shadow, quiet as always, carrying a bundle of linens she didn't need help with. He simply didn't want her walking the cold corridors alone. Her smile at the sight of him was brief, tired, but warmed him like a blanket. But there was unease in the air, something sharp, a tension that crawled under doors, a silence that didn't feel like peace, but like the moment an arrow is pulled back just before release. He felt it first when he passed the courtyard. The heir stood there with 2 guards, his expression twisted into a smile that was too calm, too practiced. The kind of smile that was never good news for people like them. The boy tried to pull his mother into a different hallway, but she gently squeezed his hand. "It's just another day," she whispered. But he knew it wasn't. They entered the grand hall together. Servants were lined along the walls. Guards stood at attention. And at the center, the Lord sat with a tight expression and a stiffness that betrayed discomfort more than authority. The heir was already there, leaning against a pillar, expression smooth as polished stone. When the mother stepped inside, all conversation died. "There she is," the heir announced, voice ringing through the hall with theatrical sharpness. "Fetch her forward." The boy instinctively moved first, stepping in front of his mother. But she gently pulled him behind her, keeping her palm on his chest to steady him. The heir circled her slowly, like a predator enjoying its own performance. "You were alone in the West Wing this morning," he said. "I was delivering fresh linens, my lord," she replied, her voice steady but soft. "Yes," he said with a chilling smile. "And something in that wing has gone missing." His words dropped like stones into a still pond. Murmurs spread. The boy's pulse quickened. The mother's breath stilled. The heir stepped closer until he stood inches from her. "A gold clasp," he said. "A family heirloom." The boy felt his stomach drop. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. But the room believed it instantly. Nobles looked at her as though they had been waiting years for a reason to turn their whispered prejudices into accusations. The guards stiffened. Several servants lowered their heads, not in respect, but in quiet terror of being associated with her. "My lord," she said, meeting the heir's gaze without flinching, "I have stolen nothing." "Oh?" The heir lifted a brow. "Then why did I find this?" He reached into his cloak, producing a gleaming gold clasp. "In the basket you carried?" Gasps erupted through the room. The boy froze. He had seen that basket. The heir had passed by earlier that morning, and he understood in an instant. The heir had planted it. He had staged everything. Her voice trembled for the first time. "I did not put that there." "But you were alone," the heir said, swirling the clasp in his fingers. "And this is not the first time someone has suspected you of taking what is not yours." It was the first time. But the heir knew that lies spread faster than truth. The lord shifted uncomfortably. "Son, perhaps we should investigate further." "No." The heir cut him off with the confidence of someone who knew he could. "Disrespect must be punished quickly. It keeps order." Order. That was what they always called it when cruelty wore a crown. The boy couldn't stay silent. He stepped forward before he even realized his legs were moving. "She didn't do it," he said, his voice thinner than he wanted. "She would never steal. She..." The heir's eyes snapped toward him, cold and amused. "Oh," the heir said slowly, "and why should we believe you?" Because she was his mother. Because he knew her. Because she had given everything and taken nothing. Because she was the only honest soul in a house built on secrets. But before he could speak, the heir turned back to the hall. "You all know what she is," he proclaimed. "A servant who forgets her place. A woman who has grown too familiar with this household. A woman who thinks she can take what belongs to my family." The venom behind his words wasn't just classism. It was hatred. Racial. Personal. Inherited and festering. The boy's fists clenched until his nails cut into his own palms. His mother lowered her gaze. Not in guilt, but in resignation. She had survived indignities her entire life. But this one pierced deeper. It wasn't just humiliation. It was erasure. "I asked to defend myself," she said quietly. The heir scoffed. "You have no right to ask for anything." The boy felt his breath leave him. The heir wasn't done. "In this house," the heir continued, "a thief must be punished publicly. Let everyone see what happens when someone like her forgets her place." Someone like her. Dark-skinned, poor, unprotected, unwanted. The Lord finally stood, but too slowly, too weakly. "She has served us well for years. She humiliated us today," the heir snapped. "And you will allow it because she is your..." He stopped himself. Everyone felt the unfinished sentence. "Because she is your..." What? Your servant? Your mistake? Your secret? Silence strangled the room. Her eyes filled with a shame she did not deserve. And the boy felt something inside his chest rupture. A breaking that was not loud, but final. The heir turned to the guards. "Seize her," he ordered. The world turned cold as steel. The boy stepped forward, shaking, terrified, furious, and determined in a way he had never felt in his life. "No," he whispered. It was the first time he had ever opposed the heir openly, and it would be the moment that changed everything. The guards moved toward her without hesitation. Two armored men with hands trained to obey commands without thought, without mercy. Their boots struck the stone floor like drumbeats, each step echoing through the hall like a countdown to something irreversible. The boy didn't have time to think. He acted before fear could stop him. He rushed forward, placing himself between the guards and his mother, his arms spread wide, his chest rising and falling in sharp, frantic breaths. "Don't touch her," he said. His voice cracked because he was still a child, but the words were unmistakably brave. The hall erupted into gasps. The heir laughed, a dry, disbelieving sound that bounced off the high ceilings. "You?" he sneered. "You think you can stop them?" The boy didn't answer. He didn't move. His mother reached for his shoulder, panic flaring in her eyes. "Please, don't." But the heir didn't let her finish. "Take him too," the heir snapped. "If he wants to stand with her, let him face the consequences meant for her kind." The guards hesitated. Not out of compassion, but out of uncertainty, because dragging a child across the hall in front of nobles watching like vultures risked scandal. The heir noticed the hesitation and stepped down from the dais, his boots clicking sharply on stone. He approached the boy slowly, savoring every step until he stood towering above him. "You think you're protecting her," he said softly, too softly. "But all you're doing is proving what you are." The boy clenched his jaw. The heir leaned closer. "Worthless." Something snapped. The word sliced deeper than any blade, deeper than any insult he had heard whispered in corridors, because it wasn't just thrown at him, it was thrown at her, at his mother, at the woman who had survived everything the world used to break her. "Say it again," the boy whispered. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. The air stiffened. "What did you say?" "Say it again," the boy repeated, louder this time. "Call me worthless again." The heir smirked. "Worthless? Bastard. Stain." The boy's fist moved before he even registered lifting his hand. He struck the heir across the face. Silence detonated. The hall froze. Even the flames in the torches seemed to flicker in shock. Blood dripped slowly from the heir's split lip. The boy stared at his own trembling fist in disbelief, not because he regretted it, but because something inside him felt right, fierce, alive. The heir touched his lip, looked at the blood on his fingers, and then laughed, a low, dangerous sound. "You'll regret that," he whispered. And with one swift motion, the heir grabbed the boy by the collar and slammed him against a column. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. His vision blurred. His mother screamed his name. The heir punched him in the ribs, once, twice, a third time, each blow fueled by years of festering resentment. The boy gasped, his body folding, but he didn't fall. He refused to fall. He looked up, eyes burning through pain. "Hit me again," he rasped. "I'm not moving." The heir's face twisted into fury. He struck again. This time the boy fell to his knees, but still, he pulled himself up on the edge of the column. His nails scraped stone. His breath wheezed. His blood dripped onto the floor, but he stood. For her. "You're nothing," the heir spat, raising his arm for another blow. The boy wiped blood from his mouth. He straightened his back, and he forced the words from his raw, shaking throat. "I'm her son." The air froze. The hall trembled. The lord on the dais lowered his head. The boy's voice rose, echoing off the stone walls. "I'm her son," he repeated. "I am her son before anything else. Before your titles, before your wealth, before your lies. And if you ever touch her again..." He stepped toward the air. "I will make you regret being born." Gasps filled the air. Even the guards stiffened. The air stared at him as if seeing him for the first time. Not as a pest, not as a stain, but as a threat. "You dare threaten me?" the air whispered, trembling with rage. "I'm not threatening you," the boy said, voice steadying. "I'm promising." The air's face darkened with something deeper than anger, something like fear. At that moment, two guards rushed forward, grabbing the boy by the arms to restrain him. He didn't fight them. He had no strength left. But he kept his eyes locked on the air. "Don't you look away from me," the boy commanded. "Not now. Not ever." The air tried to sneer, but the expression faltered. The guards forced the boy to his knees, but he refused to bow his head. He lifted it proudly, even as blood streamed from his nose and lip. His mother rushed forward but was held back by two more guards. "Let him go," she cried. "He's a child." But the boy shook his head. "Don't beg for me," he said softly, brokenly. "I'm not ashamed." Her tears fell silently, carving lines of anguish across her face. The boy looked back at the air, bruised, battered, but unbroken, and he spoke the oath that would change the entire path of their lives. "As long as I breathe," he said, voice trembling but true, "you will never hurt her again. Not with lies, not with your hands, not with your power. No one in that hall moved. The boy's gaze sharpened. "I swear it," he whispered. "I swear it on my blood." And as the words left his mouth, the world seemed to shift, as if even the walls of the estate felt the weight of the vow he had just carved into destiny. The hall did not breathe. It hung suspended in a silence so thick that even the torches seemed to dim. The boy still knelt between the guards, blood running down his chin, eyes fierce and unwavering. The heir stood just a few steps away, chest rising in sharp, furious breaths, as if he could not decide whether to strike again or retreat. And the Lord, the man whose silence had built the foundation of all their pain, looked from the boy to the woman, to the son he had raised. And for the first time in years, something in his expression cracked. Not anger, not disgust, but shame. A heavy, suffocating shame. The heir noticed his father's shift immediately. "Do not tell me you're considering," the heir began. But the Lord raised a hand. "Enough!" His voice echoed through the hall, startling everyone, including himself. It wasn't the smooth, authoritative tone of a noble in control. It was rough, strained, as though he were speaking through years of swallowed guilt. "Father," the heir snapped, "she stole a family heirloom." "She did not," the Lord said. Gasps rippled across the room. The heir turned crimson. "You weren't even there. You don't know what she—" "I know her," the Lord interrupted sharply, more emotion in his voice than the hall had heard since the heir's childhood. "And I know you." The heir's mouth fell open. The boy felt his heartbeat pound so loudly he wondered if anyone else heard it. The heir tried again, voice trembling with anger. "She is a servant. She is disposable. She is not disposable." The Lord rose to his feet, and for a moment, the mask he always wore slipped entirely away. And she never was. All eyes swung to the mother. She looked at the floor, not out of shame, but because she feared what would come next. The truth had lived behind locked doors for too long, and she knew that once spoken aloud, it could not be hidden again. The heir's voice shook. "What are you saying?" The Lord hesitated. Only a second, but it was long enough. Long enough for the entire hall to feel the shift. Long enough for the heir's rage to turn into fear. The boy held his breath. The mother closed her eyes. And the Lord finally said the truth that had been a ghost between them for over a decade. "She is the most loyal person in this household," the Lord whispered. "And she deserves respect I failed to give her." A tremor passed through the hall. The heir stared as if struck. "Is that all you're going to say?" he demanded. "After what she's done." "What you have done," the Lord snapped. The heir blinked. The room stirred. The boy felt the air grow colder. "Yes," the Lord continued, stepping down from the dais. "I know you placed the clasp in her basket." Another explosion of gasps. Servants covered their mouths. Guards exchanged glances. A noblewoman dropped her handkerchief. The heir stumbled back a step as though physically hit. You have no proof." "I have more proof than you think," the Lord said quietly. "More than you want me to have." The heir swallowed hard. His arrogance faltered. His certainty cracked. The boy watched with stunned awe, because for the first time the heir looked small, not powerful, not untouchable, but cornered. Something he had never been in his entire life. The Lord walked past him, stopping before the mother. He did not bow. Nobles never bowed to servants, but he lowered his head, a gesture rare and heavy with meaning. "I should have protected you," he said softly. Her hands trembled at her sides. The boy stared wide-eyed. He had never seen the Lord look at his mother like that in public, never seen him acknowledge her humanity, much less her suffering. But the heir? He saw something else, something he had always suspected, something he had always feared. His voice broke. "You care for her." The Lord's jaw tightened. "I always have." The heir's face twisted, not with confusion, but with something darker. betrayal, fury, the kind that burns whole cities to the ground. You loved her, the heir whispered. No one breathed. The mother looked away. Pain flickered across her features, pain she had tried to bury for years, pain the heir had sensed but had never dared to confirm. I'm your son, the heir said, voice trembling dangerously. I am your firstborn. I am your legacy. You are my son, the Lord said, but she never wronged you, and neither did he. The boy flinched. A few nobles gasped again. The heir's eyes widened with pure horror. He? The heir repeated. He? You're acknowledging him? The Lord didn't answer. But silence is an answer, a deafening one. The heir's expression broke into something wild, almost feral. You're choosing them, he whispered. No, the Lord said with a tired, hollow expression. I am choosing the truth. The heir snarled, taking a step forward as if ready to strike someone, anyone. Guards moved instinctively, hands on hilts. The boy stood slowly, despite his injuries. One guard tried to push him back down, but he shook him off. He faced the heir directly. This ends today, the boy said, voice low, bruised but steady. No more lies, no more punishments, no more fear. You think you've won something? The heir spat. You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. The boy didn't react, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't the one who looked small. The house was dividing, right before their eyes. Servants whispered in clusters. Nobles shifted uneasily. Even guards exchanged glances, unsure whose orders they should follow. The heir's power was slipping, and the boy's truth, the mother's truth, was beginning to rise. The hall belonged to neither the heir nor the Lord anymore. It belonged to the truth. And truth, once spoken aloud, becomes a storm that no noble, no heir, no kingdom can contain. Rage is loud, but the heir's rage was something else entirely. It was silent, a silence so violent it made the heir tremble, a silence that felt like the moment before lightning strikes, a silence that warned everyone in the hall that something terrible had just been born inside him. He stared at the Lord, then at the mother, then at the boy, his face slowly draining of color until only a sickly shade of hatred remained. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire world tilt off its axis, and he refused to fall alone. You humiliate me in front of the entire house, the heir whispered, voice shaking with fury and disbelief. You side with them? Enough, the Lord said again, but the command held no authority anymore. His years of silence had robbed him of moral ground. He had protected appearances instead of people. He had protected lineage instead of truth. He had protected the heir's cruelty instead of the woman who had given him unconditional loyalty. And now, he was reaping the consequences. The heir took a single step backward, as if physically recoiling from the truth. Then another. Then he turned, but not to leave, to strike. He lunged toward the mother so quickly that several nobles screamed. His arm raised, fingers curled like claws. It was instinct, born from years of believing she was beneath him, a reflex carved from entitlement and hatred. But he never reached her. The boy moved faster. He collided with the heir mid-strike, the impact sending both of them crashing into a table that splintered beneath their weight. Nobles shrieked. Servants pressed themselves against the walls. Guards surged forward, unsure whether to intervene or to let the explosion unfold. The heir scrambled first, fueled by humiliation. You dare touch me? He snarled. You tried to hit her, the boy shot back, breath heaving. As long as I stand, you won't. The heir lunged again. This time his fist connected with the boy's jaw, snapping his head to the side. Pain flashed bright and sharp, but the boy didn't fall. He staggered, steadied himself, and met the heir's furious eyes with something terrifyingly steady. You're weak, the heir spat. You're scared, the boy replied. Fear. The word hit harder than a punch. The heir roared, charging again, but the boy ducked, grabbed his shoulder, and shoved him back with a force he didn't know he possessed. The heir slammed into a pillar hard enough to knock the wind out of him. You think you can rise against me? He rasped. I'm done kneeling, the boy said. Guards rushed in, grabbing both of them, struggling to pull them apart. The heir thrashed like a wild animal, kicking, clawing, spitting commands that no one obeyed anymore. "Get off me," he shouted. "I am the heir. I command you." But the guards' grips tightened, their eyes avoiding his. The shift in allegiance was subtle, but unmistakable. The room had seen too much, heard too much. The heir's authority had been cracked open, and the boy's presence, bloody, bruised but unbowed, was no longer something they could overlook. The mother tried to move toward her son, but two servants stepped in front of her, not to restrain her but to shield her. Their trembling hands and fearful eyes revealed everything. They no longer trusted the heir. They feared what he might do. They had reached their silent breaking point. The heir saw it too, and the betrayal inflamed him. "You're all fools," he shouted, struggling in the guard's arms. "He's manipulating you. She's manipulating all of you. They're beneath us. They are nothing." "No," the Lord said, stepping forward at last, the weight of years aging him in seconds. "They are not nothing." He looked at the mother, and something mournful, gentle, unforgiving softened his voice. "They never were." The heir's expression contorted, a child's wounded rage trapped inside a man's face. "This is your fault," he hissed at his father. "You should have chosen me. You should have protected me from this shame." "It is not shame," the boy said, still restrained, still bleeding, still standing. "It is truth." The heir went still. Something dangerous settled in his eyes. A plan, a vow, a promise of devastation. "If truth is what you want," the heir whispered, "then truth is what you'll destroy with." The room went cold. "What does that mean?" the Lord demanded. But the heir did not answer the Lord. He spoke only to the boy. "You've ruined everything," he said. "My name, my place, my father's pride, everything." He leaned forward, hatred simmering in every syllable. "And I swear to you, I will ruin everything you love in return." The boy felt the world tilt, because this wasn't a threat shouted in anger. It was a vow spoken with surgical precision. Guards tightened their grip on the heir. "Take him to his chambers," the Lord ordered. "Do not let him leave until I say so." The heir sneered. "You think you can cage me like an animal?" His smile was chilling. "You will regret this." Guards dragged him away, his boots scraping the floor. He didn't fight anymore. That was the worst part. He didn't need to fight. He was already planning. When the doors slammed shut behind him, the hall finally exhaled. The boy was released. His mother rushed to him, her hands trembling as they cupped his bloodied face. He leaned into her touch, exhaustion washing through him. "I'm fine," he whispered. But the hall knew he wasn't. The house knew it wasn't. The truth had erupted, but truth alone didn't heal wounds. It exposed them. The mother clung to him as if afraid he would be torn away again. The Lord sank onto the dais, pressing his trembling hands to his face. And every servant, noble and guard felt the same icy realization crawling up their spine. The heir's rage had not ended. It had only just begun. All her life she had survived by swallowing words, by bowing her head, by taking blows meant to break her spirit and turning them into silence the world mistook for obedience. But the day her son bled for her, the day he stood between her and the heir, the day the truth cracked open the foundations of the household, something inside her rose that had slept for far too long. Courage, not the loud kind, the kind shaped in darkness, molded in work-worn hands and quiet dignity. When the heir was dragged away and the hall began to shift from chaos into trembling stillness, the mother stepped forward slowly, as if daring her legs to hold her. Her son felt her move and caught her hand gently. "You don't have to." "Yes," she whispered. "I do." Her voice was soft, but it carried a gravity that pulled all eyes toward her. Even the torches seemed to burn quieter as she walked into the center of the hall, the very place she had been humiliated, accused, broken. Now she stood there willingly. For the first time. The Lord looked up from the dais, eyes widening in confusion, guilt, and something deeper. The mother did not avoid his gaze this time. She held it, steady, unflinching. "Speak," the Lord said quietly. "Whatever you wish to say, say it." Servants pressed closer. Nobles braced themselves. Guards stiffened in a line. Everyone understood instinctively that what she was about to reveal would change everything. She clasped her trembling hands together and drew a breath that felt like it had taken her entire life to inhale. "My lord," she began, her voice steadying with each word. "The truth I carry is older than any stolen clasp. Older than any accusation. Older than the heir's cruelty." The boy squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. "I have never taken anything from this house," she continued. "But this house has taken much from me." Her words sent a ripple through the hall, soft, shocked, disbelieving. She took another step forward. "I came here when I was barely a woman, alone, with no family left alive. I thought I had found a place to survive, to work, to live quietly." Her eyes flickered toward the nobles who had judged her for years. "I never wanted attention. I never sought favor. I asked only for respect, for safety, for dignity." Her voice wavered, just once, but she steadied herself again. "Then I met you, my lord." The hall stiffened. The Lord closed his eyes for a painful heartbeat. "I served you faithfully," she said, her tone no longer trembling. "I listened when you needed comfort. I worked twice as hard when you struggled to keep the household running. And I cared for you when illness nearly took your life." A noblewoman gasped. A guard shifted his stance. The room tightened around her words like a fist. "Respect grew," she said. "Affinity followed. But affection..." She looked down at her hands. "Affection was something neither of us meant to happen." The boy felt his chest twist. She continued. "You treated me with gentleness the world refused to give me. You saw my humanity when others refused to lift their eyes. But when I became pregnant..." Her voice cracked. The boy's hand tightened painfully around hers. "You were the first to panic." The Lord flinched, guilt slicing across his face. "You told me others would not understand," she whispered. "You told me they would be cruel, that I would be blamed, that my child would have no place here." The boy swallowed hard, tears burning at the corners of his eyes. "But I was already showing, and I would not run." Her voice grew stronger, a flame catching wind. "I carried my son with pride, even when people whispered, spat, mocked, and judged. I carried him knowing he was mine. Mine to protect, mine to love, mine to raise into the kind of man this world does not deserve." The hall buzzed with emotion, some horrified, some moved, all shaken. She lifted her chin. "And though you never dared claim him, my lord, you knew he was your blood. You knew he deserved better. And you allowed him to suffer for the sins of your silence." The Lord's hands trembled visibly, but her voice did not break again. "Your heir tormented him," she said. "Humiliated me, spread lies, stoked hatred, and you let it happen, day after day, because you feared what the truth would cost you." The boy felt tears slide down his cheek, but he didn't wipe them. He wasn't ashamed. "And now," his mother said, "that truth has come out. Not because you found the courage to say it, but because my son, our son, bleeds for me. Because he is stronger than both your title and the heir you raised." Her words cut the air like a blade. But she wasn't done. She looked at the nobles who had sneered at her for years. "I may be a servant," she said, "but I am not beneath you." A murmur surged through the room. She turned to the guards who had once looked past her. "I may be black," she said, voice deep with emotion, "but my worth is not determined by the color of my skin." The hall froze. She faced the Lord one last time. "And I may have been forced to silence all these years, but today, I speak." Silence fell, thick, reverent, electrified. Her son stepped beside her, no longer hiding, no longer shrinking, no longer afraid. He slid his fingers between hers and whispered, "I'm here." She smiled, the saddest, bravest smile he had ever seen. "For years," she said, addressing the entire hall, "people have looked at me with disgust, but the only shame in this room belongs to those who believe their power gave them the right to treat another human being as less." The Lord bowed his head. The nobles lowered their gaze. The servants stood straighter. Truth had cracked the household. Now it was beginning to remake it. And when she finally finished speaking, she did not bow. Not to the Lord, not to the nobles, not to the fear that had once ruled her life. She stood tall. A woman wronged, a woman unbroken, a woman finally seen. And beside her, her son whispered the words that had shaped his life. "You never had to stand alone, Mama. Not then, not now, not ever." And with those words, the house crossed a threshold that none of them could turn back from. All her life, she had survived by swallowing words, by bowing her head, by taking blows meant to break her spirit and turning them into silence the world mistook for obedience. But the day her son bled for her, the day he stood between her and the heir, the day the truth cracked open the foundations of the household, something inside her rose that had slept for far too long. Courage, not the loud kind, the kind shaped in darkness, molded in work-worn hands and quiet dignity. When the heir was dragged away and the hall began to shift from chaos into trembling stillness, the mother stepped forward slowly, as if daring her legs to hold her. Her son felt her move and caught her hand gently. "You don't have to." "Yes," she whispered. "I do." Her voice was soft, but it carried a gravity that pulled all eyes toward her. Even the torches seemed to burn quieter as she walked into the center of the hall, the very place she had been humiliated, accused, broken. Now she stood there willingly. For the first time, the Lord looked up from the dais, eyes widening in confusion, guilt, and something deeper. The mother did not avoid his gaze this time. She held it, steady, unflinching. "Speak," the Lord said quietly. "Whatever you wish to say, say it." Servants pressed closer. Nobles braced themselves. Guards stiffened in a line. Everyone understood instinctively that what she was about to reveal would change everything. She clasped her trembling hands together and drew a breath that felt like it had taken her entire life to inhale. "My lord," she began, her voice steadying with each word, "the truth I carry is older than any stolen clasp, older than any accusation, older than the heir's cruelty." The boy squeezed her hand. She squeezed back. "I have never taken anything from this house," she continued. "But this house has taken much from me." Her words sent a ripple through the hall, soft, shocked, disbelieving. She took another step forward. "I came here when I was barely a woman, alone, with no family left alive. I thought I had found a place to survive, to work, to live quietly." Her eyes flickered toward the nobles who had judged her for years. "I never wanted attention. I never sought favor. I asked only for respect, for safety, for dignity." Her voice wavered, just once, but she steadied herself again. "Then I met you, my lord." The hall stiffened. The Lord closed his eyes for a painful heartbeat. "I served you faithfully," she said, her tone no longer trembling. "I listened when you needed comfort. I worked twice as hard when you struggled to keep the household running. And I cared for you when illness nearly took your life." A noblewoman gasped. A guard shifted his stance. The room tightened around her words like a fist. "Respect grew," she said. "Affinity followed. But affection..." She looked down at her hands. "Affection was something neither of us meant to happen." The boy felt his chest twist. She continued. "You treated me with gentleness the world refused to give me. You saw my humanity when others refused to lift their eyes. But when I became pregnant..." Her voice cracked. The boy's hand tightened painfully around hers. "You were the first to panic. The Lord flinched, guilt slicing across his face. "You told me others would not understand," she whispered. "You told me they would be cruel, that I would be blamed, that my child would have no place here." The boy swallowed hard, tears burning at the corners of his eyes. "But I was already showing, and I would not run." Her voice grew stronger, a flame catching wind. "I carried my son with pride, even when people whispered, spat, mocked, and judged. I carried him knowing he was mine, mine to protect, mine to love, mine to raise into the kind of man this world does not deserve." The hall buzzed with emotion, some horrified, some moved, all shaken. She lifted her chin. "And though you never dared claim him, my lord, you knew he was your blood. You knew he deserved better, and you allowed him to suffer for the sins of your silence." The Lord's hands trembled visibly, but her voice did not break again. "Your heir tormented him," she said, "humiliated me, spread lies, stoked hatred, and you let it happen, day after day, because you feared what the truth would cost you." The boy felt tears slide down his cheek, but he didn't wipe them. He wasn't ashamed. "And now," his mother said, "that truth has come out. Not because you found the courage to say it, but because my son, our son, bleeds for me. Because he is stronger than both your title and the heir you raised." Her words cut the air like a blade, but she wasn't done. She looked at the nobles who had sneered at her for years. "I may be a servant," she said, "but I am not beneath you." A murmur surged through the room. She turned to the guards who had once looked past her. "I may be black," she said, voice deep with emotion, "but my worth is not determined by the color of my skin." The hall froze. She faced the Lord one last time. "And I may have been forced to silence all these years, but today, I speak." Silence fell, thick, reverent, electrified. Her son stepped beside her, no longer hiding, no longer shrinking, no longer afraid. He slid his fingers between hers and whispered, "I'm here." She smiled. The saddest, bravest smile he had ever seen. "For years," she said, addressing the entire hall, "people have looked at me with disgust. But the only shame in this room belongs to those who believed their power gave them the right to treat another human being as less." The Lord bowed his head. The nobles lowered their gaze. The servants stood straighter. Truth had cracked the household. Now it was beginning to remake it. And when she finally finished speaking, she did not bow. Not to the Lord. Not to the nobles. Not to the fear that had once ruled her life. She stood tall, a woman wronged, a woman unbroken, a woman finally seen. And beside her, her son whispered the words that had shaped his life. "You never had to stand alone, Mama. Not then. Not now. Not ever." And with those words, the house crossed a threshold that none of them could turn back from.